Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd. And Michael, welcome to a new season.
Thanks, Brad. This past season was one of my favorite seasons. But I am excited for season 8, and I can't believe I'm saying that out loud. Season 8.
Ooh, love it. Michael, let's roll out to our loyal audience. What is in store for them for this season? Drum roll, please.
As a business and healthcare law firm, we represent clients in multiple sectors and multiple specialties, especially healthcare.
Yep.
This season, we're going to be searching for some common ground, Brad.
Okay.
We are trying to find that commonality for our diverse audience, and we're going to bring in lots of guests to help us.
Cool.
This season's theme is the universal language, business.
I don't know if that sounds right, Michael.
You know, Brad, I hate to admit you're right. I agree with you. In fact, I even Googled it because I always thought the universal language is love.
L'amour, c'est très bien. Je suis tellement amoureux. Le français, la cuisine, la vie, l'amour, fromage, Paris.
Okay. Yeah, that's enough. That's Brad. We got to stop. I'm from Texas. I don't speak any French. No. I think I heard wine in there somewhere.
Yes, you did.
But yeah, we gotta move on from the French.
No, I see. I always thought the true language of love was speaking French because that means you could be eating lots of cheese and drinking lots of wine. But I'll grant you that business is a universal language.
According to Siri, you're right, Brad. In fact, we're all right.
Okay, good.
Love is considered a universal language, and French is considered the universal language of love. And, of course, as you said, business is a universal language as well.
So, Michael, are you saying we should change the format and maybe talk about love this season, but maybe still stay away from our dating lives?
Definitely stay away from our dating lives. But maybe we can combine all of this together and have a season that's about business and love.
Ooh, okay. Challenge accepted. Michael, following this new season on business and love, did you know that it's legal for an attorney to sleep with their clients in Texas?
That escalated quickly, Brad. This is why you can't have nice things.
Oh, yeah, that's probably right.
So, and it's also a reason we can't host a show talking about love or talking about love and business.
All right, let's go down a cleaner path. You and your wife, Stephanie, met at a law firm.
Yes, and to be clear, she was not a client, so we weren't testing this law that you were happen to know really easily off the top of your head, which we'll just follow up on that later. And there was a 15-year gap between our workplace encounter and our first date.
Don't tell me you're put in that friend zone and eventually you found a way to escape.
No, nothing like that. Plus, Brad, we all know there's no escaping the friend zone. Stephanie was actually my replacement at my first job.
So they upgraded.
Out of law school, yes. Yes. On so many levels, yes. I had been moved from one section of the firm over to another section of the firm. In fact, I was moved over to be working directly for the name partner. And then Stephanie was hired for my old position. And we ended up working together for a few months before I ended up taking a job at another firm. Yeah,
Michael, so far, this is not much of a love story at all.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you're right. We barely knew each other. That part of the story, us working together, is important because all my work friends ended up becoming her work friends. And so fast forward through lots of life, I even met you at some point along the line, all the way up to 2011. And our mutual friends from this original job went to work to try to set us up after Stephanie had moved back to Dallas from Los Angeles. And we both said no for about 2 years.
Yeah, now this is starting to sound like one of those classic, Hallmark love stories.
Yeah, I know. It's not that exciting. We both had adult stuff going on.
Oh, that does not sound like a good Hallmark story.
I was trying to be a partner in a law firm. I was trying to keep you in check, and you know as well as anyone how hard that is.
That is difficult.
And I was a single parent of 4 kids, which was easy compared to being your partner, but still a lot of work. And Stephanie was trying to establish herself at work in Dallas after moving from L.A., and juggle being a single adoptive mother.
All right there, Casanova. Tell the audience what changed.
Well, our mutual friends saw something that neither of us had time to sit back and focus on and see, I guess, because they tricked us both into showing up to a happy hour. They called her, set up a happy hour, then unbeknownst to her, called me and asked me to join for a old work happy hour. And we were all there. I decided to ask her out on a date. We were married 10 months later.
Okay. Well, Michael, I have a confession. First, I am not a stalker. Second, I actually have a picture of the first date you were ever on. Riley, drop it up there so our audience can see it. So our audience, just to let you know, I was not following Michael. My family just happened to be at the exact same restaurant on their first date, and we randomly there. So I did what any good friend would do. I leaned over to the left and took a quick picture of him sitting there on his first date.
And sent it out to all our friends. Yes,
I might have done that too, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Who needs enemies when you have friends who can mess with each other? Well, at least now we have a photo capturing the moment because we ended up getting married.
Yes. I think we should stick to business, though, this season.
Yes, and we both know we don't have the maturity to keep a love theme on the rails.
Yeah.
You're going to, no pun intended, love today's opening story about the universal language, business.
Yeah, and I cannot wait to introduce today's guest. I hear one of them is particularly humble, although he's very famous, interesting, and handsome. I'll let the audience see for themselves.
Yes, Brad, we all get it. You're one of the guests today.
Yes, I am.
And you can't call yourself handsome. No. Remember, we are also now on YouTube.
Ooh, block that out.
Yes.
Rats, yeah, I totally forgot about that. Fine. We will say I have a great personality. But no, seriously, I'm excited to introduce our guest format this season and for us to actually be the first guest.
Well, Brad, other than being devilishly handsome on our audio-only format.
Yes, so hot on audio.
We're gonna start the interview, and you get to be the guest of honor for the first question.
Awesome. Hit me with it.
Tell the audience your professional story.
Sure. And so, probably as most of y'all know, I was born in New Orleans. Go Saints, go Saints, go Saints. After graduating from law school, I ended up working for in-house counsel for or assistant general counsel for a management service organization. Yes, they existed back then. For multi-specialty, they manage multi-specialists from surgeons all the way to ENT docs to chiropractors. There was a lot of great way of really being introduced to the medical world. Although, as we've talked about before, my dad was an orthopedic surgeon, so from the outside, I kind of understood what life was like as a doctor. Eventually, I did leave the management service organization to go to our outside healthcare counsel, and at this particular firm, I was exclusively working with physicians and or the businessmen that did ancillary deals with them. So it was a boutique practice. We had clients pretty much all across the Gulf South, and it was a great spot to really cut your teeth in the regulatory world and business world that I ended up starting with. Eventually, as you know, a little storm called Katrina washed me northward, and I met some gentleman named Michael Byrd. And so in 2015, I took all my skills, which were not much, I guess, Michael, but enough of them, to Dallas, Texas, where we met at our old firm. And where do you come in this picture?
Well, first, Riley, please mark where Brad called me a gentleman, and I would like to pull that and use it whenever possible.
Riley, please make sure you erase if I ever call him a gentleman again.
So, speaking of commonalities this season, that's I know that the day I saw your resume, because one of our mutual friends brought it into me, and I was like, that looks like my resume. We have a lot of commonality in our story, starting with the fact that I'm the son of a doctor. And there is something to feeling like you're living that life of medicine and understanding what it's like, to have, medical things around your house and that lifestyle around your house. And my dad encouraged me to be a lawyer all going up through school. I decided to do it. And I went to work for a big law firm out of law school doing business litigation, which is, as not what we do today, but it really set in motion a lot of foundation for what we do today, because I was in the courtroom fighting over business disputes.
Yes.
And at the same time, starting to get some pet projects from my father and his partners, and starting to cultivate a healthcare practice. And really, they kept asking me to do non-litigation things. And I was like, wow, this is great. There's not all the fighting.
So much more fun.
I know. A lot more. I mean, there was strategy involved, all that good stuff. And so that kind of part of the story brought me to the point where you and I partnered together to build, what is ByrdAdatto today.
Yeah, that's right. And then for our audience to understand, Michael and I, before we started our firm, we were together for almost a decade straight at our old firm building out that section. So we've been practicing together nearly 17 years. And by the way, to our audience, we have just recently celebrated our 7th anniversary. So happy anniversary to you, back to our love story. Mm-hmm. And that means we really are a match made in heaven. Maybe we should just be partners.
Brad, you just said we're partners.
Yeah. We did. Right. Thanks for the reminder. I'm old like you now. Not as old, obviously. So, Michael.
And I'm a gentleman.
You are not. Michael, anyone who said that is a liar and a thief. Wait, never mind. Michael, over the years, you and I have advised clients on their career paths, and they're starting their businesses. And we've done this, luckily for us, in multiple, like the different industries, from healthcare to real estate to you name it. It just seems like we have so many different opportunities that come across our desk. But going back to, let's talk about some commonalities that we've experienced in starting our own firm, similar to how we would advise our clients.
Yeah, it's crazy too. I mean, not only representing other doctors, but we've represented law firms.
Yeah.
And so when we started our own firm, I was surprised by the things the perspective I gained by doing it, because we'd been running the larger firm with 40 plus lawyers. There was just something different about starting a small business. And for me, the first surprise I experienced that just jumped out is, for years we've had these basic conversations with a client that's starting a business about formation of the entity and making a tax election.
Oh, yeah.
And it was interesting because you and I had been in a business that was an S corporation for years. Mm-hmm. It's a certain kind of pass-through entity that has, we were basically employees and partners, and we got K-1s and distributions, but we got paid a paycheck. And that when we formed ByrdAdatto, decided to be taxed as a partnership. And we had advised countless times on partnership versus S corp, and it was interesting living the life of being a partnership and realizing that there are real differences, that as a partnership you can't be an employee, you're a partner, and so that means instead of a W-2, you have guaranteed income and you have to pay taxes quarterly. And so it really brought to me a different perspective on those conversations with clients when they're asking, well, should I do an S corp or a partnership? And I can say more than check with your CPA, which P.S. check with your CPA. But I do at least have something I've lived now, and it feels like kind of the lines have been colored in a little bit.
Yeah, it goes back to a lot of times when you say, you've done something, and or you advise someone to do something, but until you actually do it, it lives differently, and you react differently. And I think if we're going back to certain things that I've looked at, if we're reflecting, is how often as we talk to someone and they're starting their business, you start asking questions about their business plan. a lot of times if they're meeting with them in person, they give you that stare as to what's the business plan or why would I need it. And I remember you and I working diligently on building up this beautiful business plan. We back the napkin stuff. We actually, believe it or not, audience, did actually really well, almost hitting our business plan. But our business plan was blank on how do you start it? Like, what does your first 90 days look like? What type of money do you have to go get it? Where do you go buy your stuff? What kind of stuff are you going to get? I mean, all the things that you need, that is startup cost. That is capital that you need to have now. And is that coming out of your pocket, or hopefully yours, not mine? Or are we finding someone else's pocket? And that's the one thing, and I'll give my hat tip to my dad on this one. Years ago, he said, go out, find a banker, and make him your best friend. So shout out to Chris Williams at BTH, because he became one of our best friends. He, like a good banker, learned our story, was interested in finding a way to help us, and ended up developing. We ended up doing a line of credit with him, which was probably a little bit, audience, fast forward to understanding that means you're personally guaranteeing something. And so be prepared for that, some heart palpitations. But, I think, for us, Michael, that was an important element of having that money come in. And then we also had the hard conversations okay, if money's not flowing through the way we want it to come in, we're bringing all these people to come with us. Their families are expecting that they get paid. And so we had to have that conversation of saying, well, they get paid first no matter what. We get paid last, and we had to be willing to do that. And so when you're starting a business, those are scary elements of being an entrepreneur, that no matter what business you're in, as an owner, you get paid last.
Yeah, I'm kind of flush a little bit just thinking about it.
My heart's going up a little bit, yes.
Okay, well, let's move on to kind of the next kind of question in our format this season. And so talk about, Brad, some lessons with us starting ByrdAdatto, some lessons learned that can apply to all businesses.
Well, I think going back to the startup talk I just had, one thing that you will quickly learn in any business, cash is king. Meaning that you have to have it, and understanding what does cash flow look like. And that's a huge issue. So number one is, when does your cash come to the front door? Does it come in at the beginning of each month? Does it come in? Is it trickle? And because of that, you don't know exactly how you're going to get paid and when you're going to get paid. But as you know, Michael, as the cash comes in, it doesn't mean that we all get stuck in our pockets. We got other bills to pay. And typically one of the most important ones is paying your team, and paying your team on certain dates. You can't miss those dates. There's rules and regulations behind that. So that team must come first, and making sure you have the cash in place to pay that team. So no matter when your cash comes in, that's why you have a good line of credit. So the cash comes in, you make sure your team's paid. Well, then on top of that, there may be very large items that every single year they come up, and that could be funding your 401k plan, or it could be buying your insurance or whatever ends. So you need to make sure as cash comes in, you're putting some away to the side, or using your line of credit. Again, everyone's a little bit different, but saving for those rainy day moments, because you don't know when it will happen. And if you do have cash sitting on the side, it will save you in the long run of those heart palpitations. But hopefully, going back to have a good line of credit, because that's very helpful. Michael, what are some of your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, no, those are great. And, I think one of the things that was, again, a little surprising to learn in kind of operating our firm in startup mode that applies to all businesses is just the realization that probably 80 to 90% of a business's overhead comes from just a very few sources.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's people and space,
mm-hmm.
our rent and our staff, including, our entire team, our attorneys, et cetera, is, a massive chunk of our overhead. And that's common in professional service industries as typically the top two things. Now, for our medical practices out there might be a third thing. Cost of goods sold
Yep.
can be a really big one. So if you're doing surgery and you have implants or non-invasive stuff, you have, Botox and other things, product like that. Those can be massive.
Yeah, and that's when audience, if you're ever hear someone talk on a panel, they'll say COGS.
Yes. Yeah, Brad, you just sound like a Silicon Valley
Yes.
/ Wall Street guy combined.
Yes, it was very important.
Yes. Nice. So there's a ton of power in understanding that everything that you're going to spend from an overhead perspective can be zeroed into those few areas. And it's also scary because think about COVID, Brad. We got to.
I don't want to think about COVID.
I know. But, we get life turned upside down on a dime and we don't know what's going to happen. No one knows what's going to happen. Our clients are asking us for advice on what to do. We're looking at each other, trying to figure out what to do. And what we know is that we don't want to lay off any people. We got to take care of our clients. Yep. We don't want to, cut salaries. And we also quickly learned that landlords were not interested in giving relief to anyone. They wanted to get paid too. Well, then we had to figure out what was our plan B if everything got shut down to be able to keep all those things. And so I was actually surprised how well we did cutting those other 10 to 15% in costs until we learned that everything was going to be okay. But it's when you hear about people that are furloughing around the country, it was easy to understand once you realize that that's the single biggest overhead item for most businesses.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point for you to understand when you are hiring your team and finding your space. Going back to what I said, the startup is understand your business plan. And it's an important element and it shouldn't drive every decision. But if you start being an outlier, you need to understand why is it outside of the scope of your business plan. For some of our clients, it's because they're scaling much faster. And I know for us, we've blown up our business plan multiple times, but it's okay because we had reasons to it. So, Michael, let's move on and let's talk about one of the proudest business strategies or accomplishments that would be beneficial in the industry besides hiring me as your partner.
Yeah, Brad, we'll move on. I won't say. No, Brad, we were match made in heaven, as you said earlier, and we wouldn't be ByrdAdatto if there wasn't an Adatto.
It's a love story.
Yes. So, well, you know the answer. I know you know the answer because my, passion here on the business front is around the subscription model. We have Access Plus, and of course, we have that happening with our clients in healthcare. You just wrote an article on dental subscriptions. Yeah. It's a thing out in the world because it's such a great platform and there's, all the valuation people tell you that your business is even more valued if you have a subscription model, all those things. Well, we felt like we saw something that was going to solve some fundamental problems with how lawyers charge their clients and create alignment. And so we've talked about that before, and I probably don't have enough time to go deep on that. But I'll say from a business perspective, kind of thinking about some common grounds for anyone thinking about the subscription model is learning how that impacts cash flow.
Yes.
So, we're charging clients the old-fashioned way, either on a project basis or hourly, and then all of a sudden we have people sign up to pay, a fraction of that on a monthly basis. And so all of a sudden, our monthly revenue starts dropping. At the more success we're having in getting people to sign up for Access Plus, the more we're realizing, oh, wow, this really negatively impacts cash flow, at least in the short term. Mm-hmm. And so learning how to make projections, learning how to look at what your, as our using another jargon, KPIs, your key performance indicators.
Yeah.
All of that stuff changed on a dime, and we're realizing, you started learning, that we have to look at our business in a fundamentally different way. And then it was also fun to see us hit that tipping point where we had enough members to where, like, wow, we are a subscription-based law firm, and that is the driver. And so just the whole, even just from a business perspective, which as I said, can go on and on about my passion for it on a kind of client experience perspective, but was just something I'm really proud of us for solving and it makes us a really unique business.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of, maybe not every business can have that subscription model, but most people didn't think law firms we can be. So I think it can be applicable in many different industries. I think the other piece that I'm super proud of for us is, and this is again, is how we communicate. And it sounds like a really weird one to talk about, but from a business perspective, way we communicate is different in lots of different forms, right? Forms of how we communicate with our clientele. So that's something that, having great communications with your customers if you're building a business. And then more importantly for us, which was our aha moment, whatever it was, 6 years ago now, when we decided that we really want to have, we really are focused on educating others. So obviously we have a podcast. This podcast is about educating others. We do public speaking all the time. So that's another form of education. But internally, we built ByrdAdatto University, and that was a big aha moment of understanding your biggest expense item is going to be your staff. And if you're not training them and working with them and developing workshops or just keeping them that continuous learner, they're not going to be able to improve themselves, which means that they can't improve themselves. You can't improve as a whole, as a firm. So I think going back to strategies is understanding that education should never end for you and for your staff, and finding that way to communicate with them on that. So it's maybe education and communication, or a little vice versa in that strategy that all businesses. And you and I have been on panels over the years, and we have these key speakers up there. And all they talk about is education of the staff, and that can be in so many different ways. And those who don't see that as a focus because of fear that the person may you educate them and they leave. What if they stay?
Good stuff.
All right. Well, Michael, I think let's go to commercial, and on the other side, maybe what do you bring other insights in?
Sounds great.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
Bienvenue à nouveau, on se lance les legal on de toi avec.
Brad, stop. English.
Oh.
Yeah, we're not in New Orleans.
During commercial, I kept thinking about the language of love, back to French. So, all right. Take two. Welcome back to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, Brad Datto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd. Now, Michael, this season, we're searching for this common ground. Our theme is a universal language. Business, not French.
Yes, no more French this season, Brad.
Okay.
As we shared our answers as interviewees for this first episode, it became apparent quickly that if the universal language is business, the root of that language, kind of the Latin of that language in the business, is money.
Yeah, cash.
We talked a lot about cash.
We did talk a lot about cash. And whether you're talking about cash flow, we talked about overhead, tax status, the subscription model, they all deal back with cash. And this translates to the legal model in some capacity, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, when we're advising a client, I mean, it would be very linear to just give a client a document and not try to help make sure there's alignment with what they're trying to accomplish and what they're actually doing. And so we call, the flow of money the truth serum of a business. Mm-hmm. If a client tells us, oh, this is what's happening, we know that the money flow doesn't lie when we look at their P&Ls and their balance sheets. And so when we're looking at legal documents, they may say one thing, and we know whether they're doing what they're supposed to be doing by looking at the truth serum. And the money doesn't lie. So it becomes so important to giving good legal advice, to factoring in the business side and looking at the flow of money to see if what they think is happening in reality, or what's supposed to be happening is happening in reality.
Yeah, and going with that, so you have the business side of this, but when you start applying the healthcare laws on top of this, it's even more important to understand that flow of money. We talk about this, and it feels like every episode. So if I said this before, audience, forgive us, but this is where that form and substance, as you were describing, is so important. Based on our regulations that we have to look at, depending on we're looking at federal laws or even or state laws, is the tracking of where those monies originate, how they get moved, literally from which bank account to what entity, are they correct? And all those pieces, and especially in the healthcare, could trigger different types of rules and regulations. So you have to be very careful as you bring in that cash. How did you get that cash? Where did it originate? Where is it going, and why is it going that direction?
Yeah, and my final thought, Brad, is just thinking about the universal language and talking about the root of it being money. Is that when you get into sophisticated transactions like M&A, when you hear about the proctology exam that we talk about in other episodes,
yes,
they are digging into the money and even deeper than that. You hear about quality of earnings analysis, and so it's like they're taking the truth serum and they're stripping it down even further to see what's actually happening. So again, when you're looking at commonalities, money and the flow of money are just central things to all businesses. And then, what are your final thoughts, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just tell you, anyone who's an entrepreneur, it's a wild ride. Some people compare it to the roller coaster where you're clicking on up, and next thing you know, you're screaming your head off, or sometimes you feel like you're going upside down, around and around. But there are these core business items that every action that you want to have, if you want to have a successful business, that you must follow. And I think we've kind of narrowed it down to one of those really successful pieces, which is the cash is king.
That's right. That's very, very good.
Well, Michael, that's the end of today's episode. But guess what? With the universal language of business, we're going to have all these awesome guests. Next week, we have a super special secretive guest that you don't get to know until they show up. So I'm not going to let you know. But audience, if you go look, and you'll see in our notes, you can cheat and look in the notes, and you can see who is our guest next week. But don't tell Michael. Just don't tell him. All right. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.